So Taylor, I watched your video again, and I realized I didn't get to that question you asked about what I meant concerning the apple reflecting to us redness because it absorbs all the other colors of the spectrum. Um, but and I don't really know what I mean by it, but I'm gonna try to find out right now. Um, it's absorbing more than just all the other colors of the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation. It's also absorbing um, infrared um, radiation. It's absorbing ultraviolet, X-ray, in smaller quantities, obviously, because first of all, it's nighttime and the Earth is blocking a lot of the sun's uh, particles from interacting with me. But still, I think neutrinos and some other exotic particles just go right through the Earth and are flying through me right now. And there's also some coming from deep space. Um, so the apple, and the apple is just the prototypical object. This is true for everything, every object, every bit of matter, so far as we can define it as a bit, as an autonomous agent which makes its own decision about something, no matter how simple it is, whether it's a single atom deciding, or a single electron deciding to appear here instead of there, or it's a human being deciding to measure uh, the location of an electron at any particular moment and deciding which factors it would like to measure about that electron. And you can only choose so many. If we want to know the velocity of the electron, we lose any ability to know the momentum of the same electron. And if we want to know the momentum, we lose the ability to know about its velocity. So, for the electron to decide, it also requires us to decide. We have to ask it a certain question to determine a set of possible answers. We don't determine exactly what it will be. That's why, quantum effects at the subatomic level are probabilistic. They're not determinate in the classical sense. Um, they require our input to be anything. And um, so why is it significant that the apple, or any object, absorbs something from its environment but also reflects something? See, we can't talk about the apple reflecting red as though that is all that the apple is. I experience the apple as red and round and a certain mass, but that's not what the apple is. That's the apple as it is in relation with me as an object, or as an event, as a system. Um, and when the apple is in contact with a horse, it's something different. Um, a dog, it's something different. It's not red, I can tell you, because the dogs see in black and white. Um, and so the apple, depending on what other thing it comes into contact with, when it comes into contact with Newton's head, it's gravity, right? Just because of the particular kind of conceptual activity going on in his experience at that particular moment. The apple can be all of these things. And um, it kind of, if you watch the video I made about experience being play, this speaks to why we can't conceive of information as already existing independent of us. We can't think of our mind as just a receiver of this independently, already existing determinate law, or mathematical, um, determinism. We're actually participating in it. We helped to, uh, and continually help to construct and create these other independent objects, or this other information. We're a part of it, and it is a part of us, but neither exists independently of the other. Determinism is still a valid word to use about some aspect of our experience, but it's not the whole thing. It's just that which came before, in the past. That apple exists really not as an object, but as an event, because it has a genesis, it has a history. It grew on a tree, which grew from a seed, which was in an apple that fell from a tree and decomposed, and on it goes back to, well, the first plant of its genus, or and then back some more of its phylum, and then its family and its class, or the class comes before family. Maybe or maybe phylum was actually the. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. The biological classifications, they go back and back and back closer towards the point of origin, where all life originated as a single form of very simple cellular, single cellular, non-nucleated, without any organelles, just basically a simple metabolism in a bilipid membrane. All of life goes back to that. And the apple that is part of the apple, and a part of us. We and the apple have a common origin. So when you try to understand from this point, taking history into consideration, and it goes back, history, the generative history of the universe goes back before the origin of life a few billion years ago. It goes back at least 14 or so billion years ago to the origin of matter and energy and light itself. Matter doesn't exist as atoms from the beginning. Atoms had to be achieved by certain decisions made by quarks, and stars had to be achieved by certain decisions made by the womb, or the space that the atoms found themselves in. And gravity is a relation between the matter and the space. It's not just, or matter and space are a relationship called gravity, or they're all related is the point, and they have a common history of genesis. And when the stars then achieve higher elements with more protons and neutrons crammed into the core, so that they have more electron shells and are more energetic and have more potential, then planets form, and there are like these experiments going on, getting mixed up, spinning around their own axis, and revolving around the sun. So it's like the stars then shaking up this experiment, mixing all these higher elements together, and they form chemicals, and the chemicals become life. And so you see there's this continual genesis, and I and the apple that I perceive are that. Fundamentally, they are that. They're not separate from it. You can only understand what's going on by taking all of that into consideration, and when you do, of course subject and object aren't separate, but it's not that the apple and the tree it grew from is the same as me. No, there's obviously a distinction. There's me over here eating the apple, and I'm not screaming about it, neither is the apple, because it's so separate from me. It's significantly separate enough that it doesn't experience pain. It's already dead. It's just the seed carrier with a nice wrapper that is appetizing to certain kinds of mammals. It's the tree's way of reproducing itself. And this shouldn't be taken as kind of an insult to the apple. It's just because what is the apple again? It's the apple is the tree, and the tree is the ground, and the seed, which goes back to the origin of life, and all the matter anyways. The soil and the seed began in the Big Bang and has its own developmental history. So there aren't any separations, but there are clear distinctions, and because there are distinctions, we can distinguish certain systems and relationships between systems. And these are distinctions that we make, that we understand, and that we lay atop the world with our language and our symbols. It's not that they don't exist independently of that activity that we add. It's just that nature didn't know that. It's just unconsciously doing it. And it will continue to do it whether we know about it with our symbols or not. But again, I'm out of time. But I hope I answered the apple question.